Yeah. Cha Let us all cultivate the highest form of motivation. We call it bodhicitta motivation, or the altruistic motivation, seeking complete enlightenment for the sake of all other sentient beings. And with that kind of motivation, we should participate in this Lamrim teaching on the stages of the path leading to enlightenment. No. Okay. Sorry, I thought maybe you can close the window so that... Oh, really? Because otherwise we are competing with each other. I can hear him. That's okay. All right. We'll manage, samsara. So allow me to read about a page or two from this Lamrim text, volume number 2 in the English translation, to give you the blessing of oral transmission.
Rangila Nyamba Deva Gomba, Jela, Juro, Rangi, Tita, Savanong, Junga Samba. Nijunga Samba. Nijunga Samba, Jurjula. Shendin diwa sa meni ra wang jiang wang rang de diwa sa mang diwa ma so na ne dun zhuo mi jie wa de ni suan ba zang di bei jie wa de ning xi mi bei dong jia za zhi chang sa song ba lo lo yi tue yi ba na ma jie gong ba zhao de yang ni de dong ji bei de ba wa ngong ba do do ta du ba jie yi se ji bei dong tong ma li Chao Zhuo Sen Bo Ni Xia Gong Bei Dong Yin Sen Ba Mao Song So Dewa Me Ba Da Ba Dong Yin Wei Su Yu Gong Guo Ta Yi Ba Ni Ma Ka Yi Ba Na Sa Na Qiang Ba De Ning Xie Yang Xian Du Mong Bo Jie La Ba Yun Ren Wang Rang Sang Wa Nang Xiu Zhao Ba Ba Den Ba Ba Jie Dam Nga Zhong Se Li Wei Zi Wen Ni Wei Xiong Xiao Ni Wei Xie Ba Nang Lo Gong Ba Do Ra Nang Do Ba Xian Du Xiong Diang Nga Ra Xie Ba Da Ra Ti Jian Ji Wei Zhu Guo Sim Ji Wei Yin Lu Gu Dong Ning Ji Wei Zhao Ba Zhu La So Ba Ba Zhu So Dam Zhu So Dam Ji Mi Ba So Dam Ji Dam Nga Ri Ri Na Yu Ga Li Ba Xie Ni So Zhu Ro Da Bei Xia Ri Ji Jie Jing Jiang Bei Ta Ri Ji Bei Bei Nyong Ma Gui Ji Ko Li Ba Ra Mi Ma Xie Ba Ra Pu Ro Zu Re La Ba Bei Bei Nyong Tam Dum Jie Ka Ra Yang Me Xie Di Bei Nyong Lin Ji Ka Ba Xie Ni Ba Ti Ta Ri Xia Ba Xiao Di La Yin Ji Ji Bei Ning Ji Ji Bei Cai Ni Wo Ren Dang Bo Li Kang Ge Zai Yi Di Mi Pu Di Wa Xie Di Bei Sim Jie Tam Jie Yang Dong Ye Den Ni Chang Di Bei Na Bei Jing Ji Bei Rang Ge Ngang Ge Bei Zhou Ba Da Ni Ji Bei Song Zhe Da Ni Ji Bei Song Ba Ren Zhou Ba Di Ye Zhe Zhuo Ba Yin Bei Bei Ning Ji Bei Xian Bu Ming Tao Di Xie Pu Xiong Ning Du Qie Du Ba Du Ngo Jie Ba La Ma Ning De Di Ji Ning Jie Xie De Ma Jie Ba De Zhe Bei Sui Jie Sim Jie Bei Ta Jie La Ba Ning Jie Rong Ngang Ge Rong Ge Jie Na Jie Wa Na Ning Jie Xian Ba Ning Jie Xian Bu Zhe Ni Ge Cao Ma Song So Nen Di Xiao Ba Xin Ba Jie Bei Bei Cai Jie Shi Ba Xiao Yang Long Di Zhe Yin De De Ning Jie Xian Ba Kong Bei Dao Jie Sim Jie Ma Lu Ba Ra Chang Ba Tam Jie Ne Lan Ba Yang Zhe Ba Zuo Bei Sang Zuo Bei Xiang Zhu De Mong Bei Rang Ji Mei Ji Bei Xiao Zhi Sim Xiao Zhu Ji Sim Ren Mo Guo Ba Jie De Xie Bo Sim Mei Jie Ju Ri Xie Bei Bei Ning Xie Xian Bu Ti Ni Yue Shuo De Guo Ba Song Di Di Ni Wei Xiang Zhu Sen Bei Sang Cai Jiang Cai Xie Ba Ra Xiao Dia Lam Tong Ba Ra Song Yi Sim Ji Men Ji Wei Le Tong Ba Bei Sim Ji Wa La Te De Song Lo Ti Du Le Jiang Shang Dang Mong Bei Dao Jian Dang Dun Dian Jie Ba Ran Zhou Wa Ye Xie Se Ba Chang Me Su Mo Gun Zhu Zong Ba Ra Jie Wa Ye Xie Song Wei Bei Cheng Wei Song Ji Wen Guo Zong Bei Wei Xiao Zhi Sen Ba Yang Se Me De Da Wu Xi Jie Ba Ra Jie Guo Ba Yin Na Tian Na De Da Wa Ge Shuo Dang Yu Zhe Me Na Me Ba Sim Ji Da Ye De Sang Yi Da Wa Xiao Ti Ye De Da Ge Ya De Xiao Niang Di Bei Sang Bo Ba Jie Ba Zang La Qi Zhi Chu Ni Ma Da Ba To Niang Bei Gong Bei Wei Nga Ji Wei Den Ba Xie De Xiao Zhu Shang Zi Ji Da Nga Ge Ti Du Song Ni Me Zhong Wa Xian Ji Ni Cui Yin Yin Bei 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 Sa Mo Bo Xie Jie Ba Ran De Ba Kho Na Nang La Ti Ba Xian Bu Ni Xie Bei De Nang Xie Ge Ni Su Nang Di Jie Xie Ta Ma Nang Ji Wei Ge Ba To Ma Ra To Nang Ji Wei Ti Du Wei Song Ni Yong Ar Xiong To Ma Li Yong Guo Zang Le Me Ba Nam Ji Da Ji Ye Mo Bi Xie Ru De Yang La Ma Xin Gong De Me Rong Wa Men Se Wa Men Ji Qiao Xue Se Me Zhen Ba Guo La Yang Dan Bei Ti Du Song Ni Wei Jiang Guo Zi Xie Se Wa Yin Na Wo Jie Zhen Ar Xie Ba De Wei Yong Ma Ji Jiang Ti Ba Xian Bu La Ba Ra Xiao Wa Na Ma Xi Xing Ti Jian La Ma Ba Den Nang Ngong La Ba Se Me Ji Ba Dang Do Ba Song Ni Wei Tian Ni Wei Xiao Zhu Jie Se Me Zhong Wang Yang Yue De Zhong Zhu De Gong La Dong Ba Dang Di Sim Song Na Yin La Ngong Zhong Zhu De Gong La Dong Ba Dang Sim Song Ti La Zha Xin Zhu Ge Sam Den Ji Xin Zhu Ge Sam Den Ji Ba Gao Xiao Zhe Sim 주로 넘는 제바라 소바 타부 타부 원장 대다게 너도 뭐 저거는 원도 로모 시장 거바나데 평세바당 연라 등바당 장주 유종왕당 너라자는 시바시 너 송대 제바 오 당은서 신심되게 유리명가 뒤는 데려와 가서 인제께서 삼든이 희야인스
Just to recapitulate what we did last time where we left off, we have been talking about what is called 6 causes and 1 result instruction for developing bodhicitta in Tibetan called Gyunda Menga Thun. And so of these 6 causes, where we left off last time was cultivating compassion. Okay? And so Geshe read from page 44 to the top of page 47 to give us the blessing of oral transmission.
인제 곰도한테 가르쳐서 데 가지 미과도 심지샤 인데 데려야 등에서 다 가서 등에 줘야 등에 타바디 등에서 등에 집에 날 어디 등에서 삼네 인데 고매야 돼 다들 등에도 저 가서 제냥 봐도 저 나오셔 냐뭐 근데 그다 계정으로 솜솜 산데 어디에서 에는 고매야 돼.
So on top of page 44, it is stated that the focus or the miguel, the object for developing compassion is no other than sentient beings. So sentient beings are our focus for developing compassion or nyingje in Tibetan. And the way we generate compassion is reflecting upon the 3 types of suffering that sentient beings are going through. And the 3 types of suffering, as you know, are suffering of misery, suffering of change, and extensive suffering or pervasive suffering, So we reflect upon all these sufferings that sentient beings are encountering and generate this series of thoughts, if you will. How nice it would be if these beings are free of sufferings. May they be freed of all these sufferings. May I be able to help them end the suffering, if you will. So generating this series of thoughts, we are cultivating compassion for sentient beings.
그래서 등에 페이지 다시 보고 가게 신고로 봐. 나 줘야 등에서 가서 내가 지금 정원에 얘네들 두고 줘보거든. 아니 그래서 내 소화 대화님아 저양찬 그게 집나도 되는 대화님아 지금 호텔 줘야 등에서 감도 지다지는 대화시 그래 봐. 다 차반 뒤에 등에서 해야 돼. 그래서 내용 형아지 풍부 세대 남에도 거의 사지 풍부 세도 간지다 풍부 정하면 봐. 그게 내용 인도자는 그게 코리아 소소 언제면 딱 소소 비 집어시야도 누구 가르 소소 언제 제요 뭐라 시야다 제야도 가가 그래 내용을 형은 좋아요 뭐 소소 언제 제면 그 코리아 안 좀 될라 그래 차바 뒤지 등에시고
Just to briefly introduce the 3 types of suffering. Suffering or suffering of misery is that we all know it quite well. Is the manifest forms of pain and suffering. Yeah. Now the suffering of change, is harder for us to recognize because what we regard as pleasures and comforts in some sense in the world are, as a matter of fact, a form of suffering. And the example that often is given is when we are feeling very cold, then we put on the heater or put on more clothes, then we started to feel good, nice, kind of that pleasurable feeling, But then it gets too hot, right? Now we need to switch on the air conditioning or something, or maybe take off the clothes so that we feel better. So these kind of changing feelings, the pleasures that we experience, as a matter of fact, are considered as suffering of change. And then a pervasive suffering or extensive suffering, the Tibetan is kyaba duje jidunge, This is defined as, mostly we're referring to being reborn over and again with contaminated physical and mental aggregates or, I should say, in samsara under the influence of afflictive emotions and contaminated karmic actions. I know it's a long definition we give. So basically, coming to the point, what we say is we really don't have the freedom to choose what kind of a rebirth we would like to have, right? We don't really have a freedom to say, I don't want to die for a while, I just want to stay. Well, when it hits us, it hits us. We are dead. So we really have no control over our rebirth and our death. And so all of these things are because we have been born and reborn in samsara under the dictation or the influence of afflictive emotions and contaminated karmic actions, right? That determine what kind of a rebirth we will have, what kind of situations we will be in. And so being in this kind of a cycle, like vicious cycle, going from the top of the samsara, we call the peak of samsara, Siti, to the lowest point in samsara called avicii hell, most torturous hell. Doesn't matter wherever we are, going round and round the samsara. In this way, we end up with some kind of suffering, right? And this is what we call pervasive suffering.
치료부터 다 치료 루다 담으로 건제 등에 가가 민대 버지 와시 대화도 버지 와시 다 등에 샌디 대화도야 돈다라 이게 시즌저 소수면도 어디 거기 겨와지야 돈이 들으셔 뭐도지 차바디지 등에들 제대로 버시야 되게 남자한테 낭발모도 요 말봐 저 낭배 기주서서 제가 어디 차바디지 등에서 이 종네 다 차바디지 등에 탈선 타와도 그러라 어디래 어디래지랬어.
So these three types of suffering of misery, suffering of change, pervasive suffering, in other religious systems of thought, my first footnote, usually we are thinking of Hinduism and kind, right? Not any other religions perhaps, in the historical context. There is a recognition that nobody wants suffering, everybody wants happiness and the goodness, right? So usually the suffering that is more recognized is the suffering of misery, suffering, and maybe to some extent suffering of change. Okay, and that's why, like in the those religious systems, they will say, we should really try to cultivate samadhi, higher levels of concentration, that we will be able to transport ourselves to a higher existence where there's more peace than what we find here, isn't it? And so this way, you end up in the what we call the peak of samsara, where it's tremendous kind of peace in some sense, and then you realize this is the nirvana, it isn't, then you're like, oh my gosh, there is no nirvana anymore. So you get disillusion. So there is that recognition that there's suffering change at a higher level of existence. You have more stable kind of what called peace thing. But I think it's unique to Buddha's teaching is the suffering of pervasive suffering, extensive suffering. When we develop a sense of aversion to be, towards pervasive suffering, I would really want to be free of the pervasive suffering, then we are able to develop what we call ngejung, renunciation or the aversion to misery in samsara. And with that, when we are free from this kind of a suffering, then we are really freed from the suffering of samsara. So that kind of explanation about what is pervasive suffering is exclusive to Buddha's teaching.
어디 폐자다 치료 폐자다 시대다 다 소수메디 톱자제인서 더 이네마 치료에냐 인성으로 맞게우듯한 인 로다 되게고 다 담부 탈바인 참되어와 제가 다 디데마사도 거 여저 등은냐서단 탈발 이데메 바신 이네 딜레 때에 단도 로다 제한테 뭐 인성지로와 어 디레신이 간지 간다장 그 코알을 줘야 그 탑에로 되다 낭배 뭐이제 치료받고 가지 시나 탑데 탑스 누구 말아봐.
So in the non-Buddhist religious traditions, again in the footnote, I think it's referring to Hinduism largely here, that there is a recognition that within samsara there are different levels of existence. As a matter of fact, they think that through cultivating samadhi or concentration and refining and sharpening it, we are able to be reborn in higher levels of existence where there is much more peace relative to the down below levels. And so then they think that if you reach the peak of samsara, there's tremendous, peace, if you will. So they kind of think this is moksha or nirvana, until the expiration date comes, and then, other karmas activated and reborn in the bad migrations. Now they really get disillusioned. They're like, oh my gosh, I always believed there is a liberation, and I thought I achieved it. That isn't it. So there is no moksha at all. So then they develop the wrong view pertaining to nirvana. So then, of course, that motivates them motivate means that underlies their actions, negativities, and that's how they get trapped in samsara.
that teacher, that gombe rimbate, tambo nyelgo, tene parmalgo, tene dalago, tene simje tamje those gomgo is, they gomgo at the chugombe dolly song here, what tena yikamala like and tira gomgo song here, what those gomgo is, Tamakiza. Ganga Ganga, Tambo Gumnate, and the Tamoniel goes to Rogora, Ganga Chikbares.
So the order in which we cultivate compassion is, as we have talked about this before, first we work with a nyen or a friend or someone close to us, right? We develop compassion in relation to that, relative or a close friend, whoever we want to call them. And then slowly, once we have developed compassion towards friends, the circle of friends, so to speak, then we are going to move to the circle of, in English, strangers or the neutral beings who are neither friends nor enemies, right? Then we develop compassion for them. And as we succeed in that, now we deal with the most challenging ones that we call the circle of enemies, or the people, troublemakers, or the dislike. We don't like them. And so we develop compassion towards and for them. So as we succeed in cultivating compassion in relation to these three types of beings, now we are going to extend it slowly towards all other sentient beings. So we are incorporating, right, more and more sentient beings into the scope of our compassion, and that's how we cultivate compassion. And this is how it has been recommended by great Indian master Kamal Shila in the stages of meditation or Bhavana Krama, Gomrim in Tibetan, and also in the Abhidhamma Samukchaya, or the Compendium of Sutras.
Okay, that is a Gomgoya Guba, the Karasan, that Kamalakil Gomsong, nation share is Karasan, Tambok on the beginning that Maj Magam said, Pomdor of Chiga, Chigums of Gomaina, and make up the chair sort of Yonanda Yongo, in the Kalakalafa going to any data about being the Tantoja Vijua. She has a Kotemo Yomas. That Tamako could sit in the pharmacy judge, Redekan Yuanto Javena, in the Redekan Gumnan, the Chilla Gumnan, the Tojamat, Gubata Terrace.
So this order of cultivating compassion is very much recommended by great Indian master Kamal Shila and others, and this is the way to generate compassion sequentially, if you will. Otherwise, right from the beginning, if we started to cultivate compassion in relation to this kind of all sentient beings, kind of this abstract sentient beings, right? And in some way feel like, okay, now I really feel like compassion towards sentient beings, that abstract notion. But then when we meet particular sentient beings, like especially the troublemakers, are like, oh my gosh, who the hell are you, right? He didn't say that, but And then we know we have no compassion, right? This is, so that's the problem. Looks like very nice, kind of sort of a la-la land kind of a practice, like all sentient beings, I love the universe kind of thing. Then you meet the universe in a particular, then you hate them, So that's not working. And so that's why it is said we should gradually train our mind in the way recommended now. And if we succeed in doing that, eventually we are able to think about all sentient beings, right? And then it's fine. And then, we can think of sentient beings as a whole universe. The compassion is there. Or we think about sentient beings in particulars or individual sentient beings, we still have compassion. So therefore, it's very important for us to train our mind gradually, not to go with abstract notion of sentient beings.
Oh, dear, that Gumya Gumdan of the Kanda Gumgusena, any Tanda Kibishumudan, Dringal, Sheva, Nanashi, and the Koachi, Dunga Simja, so going to hear that what they hear, and the Dunga Troda, Dunga Ye, what doing any coajish doing it some good is Namahiadi. Give children get Lord John, you know, that you can so has said, you know, what it was simply boy, what the book is.
So in order to cultivate compassion, we also bring to our mind the practices that we have already talked about earlier in the context of initial level practice and intermediate level practice, where we really think a lot about different types of suffering, isn't it? The suffering of the 3 bad migrations in particular, or the suffering of samsara in general. So we have different classifications of suffering, right? 3 types of suffering, 6 types of suffering, 8 types of suffering, So that whole knowledge and education about particular sufferings we should bring to our mind so that, first we can think in relation to self, how I have been experiencing these different types of suffering, and I really don't want them, isn't it? I want to be free of this. If you really are very sure about that, now we shift the focus onto other sentient beings. They are just like me. Nobody likes suffering, but they have all this suffering that I'm going through. So we're able to wish the same for other sentient beings. I want not only me to be free of sufferings, but I want others to be free of suffering.
Oh, dear, later, Gumzi to the Ganga, Toma, Soso, Yundo, Gumya, the country case of Shuchako, much of Soso Cardora, Sosa Lenich Yaga, Doga, Soso Yundo, the Ganga, Yabo Shana. Anything take hand pass, Ponel, body or citizens, Ali Soso got the Yabo sub, and dinner by hand boggle, spend doing it up and come to so another than so another than how to that so another than young men. Shendal comes to the Nagim Hakumarwa. Which is the Marshal so partner or Triado said that in a Tomato simply social society and about couple race.
So it is emphasized that first we should really think about suffering in relation to self, so that we are able to understand suffering based upon experiences, not just a theoretical conjecture of some kind, isn't it? Because, all the good and bad things that we ourselves go through is very personally relevant to us, and it means something, isn't it? Oh, wonderful pleasures, like, oh my gosh, what a BS, all those things, right, we go through. And so once we have that experiences informing our practice, now when we shift our focus to others, we really feel deep connection to the other's suffering, and we understand them better, isn't it? If we never contemplated our own suffering, we try to think about other suffering, in the first place, a lot of us will have difficulty relating to that, like, really. And in many ways, it's become a very theoretical construct, right? Yeah, suffering, yeah, kind of, but it has, no content or a substance, So experiences are very important for us to draw from. So therefore, personal experiences of suffering are very insightful and meaningful to be able to generate compassion for other sentient beings. And the example given is the needle, injection in modern language. Right? So if you ever got an injection, right, something poked into your body, then whatever pain it gives you, it's a real, isn't it? It's not a theory or some kind of a theoretical construct. It is pain, in the neck or whatever, right? And so then that if I'm going to poke somebody with a needle or injection, this is going to give them the pain as well, because there is that experiential insight into that, right?
Oh, dear, of course, she didn't do somebody, or did that doing it, something in the social big. Doing the Mendo telling about Yajumudo, what is that? She didn't pass some so things the something in somebody else. Seems here doing it in the part Mendo, yes, on ninja door or do yes. In the tombo so be rounding the Muslim Balapig, any handing ninja that so any, in the Digia Karsa, because South Super Double, any Kuncho Yungo Marisi.
So it all starts with one's own personal experiences of suffering in samsara. To the extent we seriously consider our own problems suffering samsara, and we seriously wish to be free of all these problems and pains, samsara, then we will much better able to empathize and relate to others' suffering and pains, right, and problems. Yeah? And so when we succeed in, contemplating our own suffering and wishing truly ourselves free of the suffering of samsara, that is called ngenjung, renunciation, isn't it? We truly wish to be free from samsara. But when we change the focus to others and wish others to be free of their suffering in samsara, that's called compassion, isn't it? So it's just like, it's just a matter of shifting our focus. When we focus on our own suffering and wish ourselves to be free of suffering, that is called renunciation from samsara. But when we shift the focus to others and wish others to be free of samsaric suffering, that is called developing compassion.
다다 공원도 비게 집을 숨는다 내가도 해제 동해 남랑 해요. 어디 되게 다 총바 점레스. 이제 비게 동해 남랑 제바데 에디 가르사 지세도 가르사 제바니 인지 미버 동해 야자주 상사를 송바 세트로와 다 동해 가지 비게 동해 용로 면다 야자주 세도 때 말에 동지로와 어디래 상사 송요 버와 등은 용로 뭐 여러 왔다 지야 짜야 차야 또야 시디데 지 등은 남자 띠띠 띠다 에네 등에 동자 용고요 버와 어딘데 삼구 그랬어 어디 삼구 때 등에 가지 삼 망아 삼나 디지 텐도 이제 망아 찍으러 그다가 심지어 등에 뭐 나라 삼노다나 디지 이제 망아 촉셔 찍으러 와 어디래서 제가 니도 그게 그래서 예수께야 등에 삼야를 상주스베 등에 삼야도 망어요레스 어디 송야스고다 어디래 다카이다 등에 삼야 거에 등에 삼야도 니랑한테 저레스 상주스어디에 부에 등에 삼고도 저게 돼요 말이야 저래서 내가 먹어서 그래 그래서 심정이 드시고 걸어 어디래스
And so in the context of small scope, initial level practice, intermediate level practice, we do talk quite a bit about different types of suffering, different classifications of suffering. But again, that may not necessarily be enough to think about suffering. In every possible way, we should explore all forms of suffering so that we truly wish to be free from any form of suffering. Yeah? And the more we take into account different types of suffering, it is to that extent we're able to generate, compassion effectively and more strongly, isn't it? If we only think about a couple of suffering here and there, that's the kind of compassion we have, like a couple of suffering compassion, I call it, right? The translator. So, so as what Geshe said, for example, at the end of page 44 over to top of page 45, it is stated that, in the Bodhisattva levels, Bodhisattva Bhumi, Changsa in Tibetan, there's mention of, reflecting on suffering. It says in Tibetan expression 110 suffering, but it's already like 100 times 10. Well, that's as many suffering as it is. So if we regard the more particular sufferings, it's to that extent we are able to develop the compassion more strongly, And so that's very important for us. And what Geshe was chuckling over was this, that some people might think that, well, reflecting on suffering is kind of a simple practice. Maybe that's for the Sharvakas to do. Bodhisattvas might have to do other things, more lofty things. Like, no. Actually, Bodhisattvas are thinking, much more about suffering than the Sharvakas. Yes, Sharvakas do think about. Sharvakas means the hero practitioners. They think about a lot of suffering because they want to be free from samsara. But the Bodhisattvas thinking about suffering of sentient beings is much deeper and more extensive because Bodhisattvas care about sentient beings, right? That's their business. That's the only job they have. So sentient beings experience all kinds of suffering, and Bodhisattvas think that's my business. Every suffering sentient being is my business, and so I have to think about it and wish them to be free of the suffering. So therefore, their compassion, Bodhisattva's compassion, is much stronger than the Sharvaka's compassion.
어디 제가 눈에 가서 망한 삼나 이 인제 망한 얘기です. 이 유일한 삼보다는 인제 쇼쇼부 얘기です. 어디에서 고나 에네 형체만 시비다 지금도 눈에서도 형체만 시도 코아지시라 눈에 해야 되고 지당 지기 때때 차가 또 드시라요 말아. 코아지시라 시고라. 그래서 뒤야부야 차마지나 이 대가지 맥도 내가 심지어 양다와 등에도 때때 인지제도 어디서 뒤 공지고 말이지. 형성은 송야 되나 이 공부 그래. 대충은 다 맞아들여 속네. 자와도 송게야요.
Bloody.
다 진짜 뭐 자가서시는 거 깨야서요 말. 그거 가지 로컬에서는 인지 죽바 되고 셔도 하고 하러.
No, sir. So, so when we cultivate compassion, our practice should be grounded in the explanation of compassion in the treatises, the generic suffering of samsara, the particular suffering of samsara, right, in detail. So that will help us to develop compassion really genuinely and more strongly, Otherwise, if we see like some suffering sentient beings, right, and we kind of feel compassion for them, and we only limit ourselves to that compassion is going to be a very limited one. Only when we see them, we feel like compassion. When we don't see them, they're out of sight, no compassion, right? And then our compassion only stays that small, limited. So we really have to think about suffering in much more details so that we are able to cultivate compassion effectively. And then we think more about suffering. The more we think about suffering, the stronger compassion we are able to generate, more stable compassion we are able to generate, maintain it,
어떻게 가서 대응하게 받는 것 그것이 티와시문 주고도 심지에 말 인루다. 근데 뒤자와 인생인루 어디서 삼야게 네 당아도 맥발리 받쳐버렸어. 그봐. 소 체네 네 다다들이야 네 제금도 죽음 빼마체네. 네 당벌배 동에 삼네 가지 나루도 삼두잖아 다 제와시에 네 시비다 다 동에 미소버답시 깨그러와. 다 미소비께서는 다 뒤돌이 인제 삼네 다 조금 적어라. 어디에 진조 빼마체네. 고무그레스. 때마다 뒤에 고알리바 맞아 봐체네. 네 우주지 풀중되듯이 때 영화 타는데 팬도 말이지. 가야 미시스는 팬도 알아.
So as I stated here in the Lumbim text, that we should take into account, some of the vital points that has already been stated here, that bodhicitta or spirit of enlightenment or mind of enlightenment is the entrance into Mahayana path and practice, isn't it? But to be able to open that door, so to speak, entrance, we have to generate great compassion, because great compassion is the source of bodhicitta, and it's very vital as well. And so while cultivating compassion, we can alternate between analytical meditation and stabilized meditation. Analytical meditation, which we call chegom, means you analyze it, right? What kind of suffering? Where has that come from? Why sentient beings have suffering that even they don't want it, right? So when we analyze it, it really helps us to generate deeper understanding. Maybe in English we say deeper appreciation of suffering, right? And then once we reach that really kind of profound understanding of the suffering, then we can do stabilized meditation, placement meditation for a while, So then once we are losing the intensity of that placement meditation, then we analyze it again, isn't it? So we are alternating between analytical meditation and placement or the stabilized meditation on suffering, and that's how we cultivate compassion for sentient beings. So through analysis, analytical meditation, we reach certain point, where we feel like, other suffering become unbearable to us, isn't it? Like you think, I really want everybody to be free of suffering. It's whatever we want is not fair, or whatever it's just. So when it becomes unbearable, the sense of compassion is activated in us, isn't it? And then we try to hold it through stabilized meditation, focus on that. And once we are losing the grip onto the meditation, then we analyze it again to be able to, ignite the fire and, again, intensify our compassion. So that's how we alternate between analytical and stabilized meditation.
어때 지금 전에 가지 심지어 능에 메서버 셰 메서버 깨네 이제 다 그게 능에 대야 그때 탑시로 되다 왜 가랑랑 그 능에 차 시고도 사야다 인지 숙심을 깨는 인지 뭐니 깨서 달라서 뭐래는 거로 와 제가 지금 신 라서 뭐고 뭐 가서 심지어 능에 되나 손은 라서 야 말로 그 탑시잖아요 용거로 와
And so, as we do really analytical meditation well, and then the kind of compassion that arises from it also enables us to experience what we call wholehearted resolve, or I call a special willpower, laksam, isn't it? Now we don't feel disconnected from others' suffering. As a matter of fact, we feel like, well, I have certain responsibility towards them, isn't it? I have a responsibility at least to help sentient beings, end the suffering. So this is how the wholehearted resolve or the special willpower, laksam, started to accompany compassion. Okay, so that's usually we considered as great compassion.
Okay. That so the big similar doing the theater, they all go big can of Chester. In top side of it, was a tag or a tan, she was done. So as a doing the simply cannot very Toya Yamara. She has that carry simply doing theater, to cover the done. In Sanjay Yajimo, the Yomar, simply time you be doing it in the was shut down good there, Sanjay Mother Yomar. In that, Shangus and Giora, simply time doing a theater on dollar. In Shangus Sim Jeji, those are those, simply doing a theater and shower. No.
So when we do analytical meditation and we develop strong compassion for others, we also feel kind of a personal responsibility to do whatever we can, help them end the suffering, that kind of special willpower. Okay? So we kind of develop some sense of commitment, right, towards in relational commitment to sentient beings, isn't it? I really wish you to be free of suffering, and I wish I can help you, to do that. Okay? Then reality checking, isn't it? Can I really do anything for them at all, right? We look at our own situations, then we know that, well, I'm in the same boat, right? Yes, I want them to be free of suffering, but I'm in the suffering as well. So right now, I don't have the ability to be able to fulfill my dream and aspirations, right? So then who has it, right? Is there anybody, who is able to do the things I wish to do for sentient beings? This is how Buddha comes into the mind, enlightened being, isn't it? So enlightened beings have the ability to assist sentient beings to be free from suffering. So therefore, I should become an enlightened being, isn't it? So I want to become an enlightened being for the sake of liberating sentient beings. So that's the motivation behind, right? So generating that kind of aspiration is called bodhicitta aspiration, isn't it? That is the spirit of enlightenment or the mind of enlightenment. So this is how the bodhicitta, Changjujism, arises from compassion with wholehearted resolve, right?
That English would give it said here. That usually would give it said, there is that been a magical bear pushing to do what what did Buddha what the Madi in the order and then doing the trader with Sewa Kase, you mean what did you in the same time Jelia mean the dinner he get to know and you just saying it's up and say this and it goes on top come on like a song just.
No, so then how can we know that we have developed the kind of compassion that's explained in the text for sentient beings, right? What's the criteria by which we can judge and evaluate that, okay, I have been cultivating compassion, and do I have it or not, right? So in Kamal Shila's Stages of Meditation Part 1, or the version 1, he talks about it. And the example given there is that of a very loving mother with one child, isn't it? And the mother loves the child so much, right? I mean, regardless of her abilities, she wants the best of everything for her child. That's love, isn't it? Regardless of her abilities, she wishes her child not to have any kind of a problem, or if they are in a problem, want to be free of the problem, isn't it? So she has that sense of compassion. And it's a very genuine compassion. It's not like faking it out or, like how nice it is, some kind of wishy-washy kind of love and compassion. It is love and compassion, right? As good as it is. So if we develop the same sense of love and compassion towards and for sentient beings, just like the mother has for her only child, then we have developed. This is the yardstick by which we can measure, I got it. And I have compassion for sentient beings.
What they got English about that gave it said that the long Detroit, that English go about this. Since I'm over town, and I was over some you go to Kursa, same dream go back. Big 介绍的俺兄弟介绍，俺强就是介的说的，是吧？一些地拉什么上，他拉是的，俺地头的这个强就是现在这么个，俺早上同对介绍呢，俺强就是介的是。
So out of that sense of compassion, and with the wholehearted resolve, right? And if we, without much effort, having to make effort, more spontaneously, we develop this aspiration-seeking enlightenment for the sake of all other sentient beings. So that's called generating bodhicitta, isn't it? The bodhicitta sort of comes out, without much effort. Okay.
我觉得，是不是就就是你什么都给我送的，那强就是也身边的这些些把小我说，我觉得他可能。但你是什么记得我讲的？我觉得他强就是什么的，因为什么他做上对我介绍呢？因为强就是什么给我猜着哇？我第二是的，这当的人呢，第二是我讲的样，啥通不那个第二个讲嘛的是，他那现在讲没给啥说哇？讲没那个说话的是，啥通不那个都个我讲了哇？我听我说他通嘛讲的我第这个说的是，现在第二是嘛就不打可是讲过的是我的。
So, what is being stated here is as we train our mind to cultivate compassion and bodhicitta, so wherever we started to feel more effortlessly, this aspiration-seeking enlightenment for others, then we really have bodhicitta, okay? Even at the initial level. We're not talking about how the bodhicitta becomes very spontaneous on a very high spiritual grounds of the levels. Of course it is, but initially as a practitioner we don't have it, we are cultivating it. At what point do we know we have it, right? When there's that spontaneity of compassion and bodhicitta arising, then that's when initially we can know that now we have, right, the real bodhicitta.
他听的讲上到门边到现当，你基本上啊，以强就是什么长没什么工作。工作怎么这么些什么长命什么就是我说第二的，看着上的目标到现在是要是上是的，可是啥？你们说上的目标到现在话，被累上现在，那目标到的，看见长寿怎么的，行动怎么，我对不对？今天个长辈，那长寿身体，今天个那早上从这介绍呢，那的长命什么做上辈，那我怎么样个的。당벌 쏘는 것도 어떻게 정면성 사본 거 좀 하게 심기들 해서 다 도마지야 돼봐. 그래서 저 정면성 좀 정신성이 뭐 희인지 송도와 고스 어디 드레스고 다 정신성 뭐네叫了 드레스고 그랬어.
알아 정신성 제유되니 정면성 그 초사고
어디 다 정면성 소 사본 고도 받아 이 정신성 뭐네 장사 제와. 정신도 못해서.
We're on page 46 on the top. We have a stanza quoted from Asanga's Mahayana Compendium, and which states, I quote, that which has the attributes of goodness, the power of wishing, and firm aspiration, always initiates the Bodhisattva's three immeasurable eons, unquote. So what this really means is through training of the mind, and so whenever we experience this kind of spontaneity of bodhicitta, spontaneity means without much effort it arises naturally in us, wishing to be enlightened for the sake of all other beings. So that is the starting of real bodhicitta, and this is also the starting of accumulating what we call merit for three great countless eons, right? So we said we need to accumulate positive energy or merit for three great countless eons. This is the starting point. How?
어디 다다 오늘 장상게 에네 유레명아 되는 금주를 좀 받이 도스 공거로와. 다 드려 먹음 전에. 에네 딘데가 에네 당번 비 코아지시라도 삼바카에 그냥 매바 시에니. 에네 심지타도 다 상지고 뭐 타고 저가지고 쩌마 딘데시. 인 딘데 삼노들 야 쇼주스 오늘 장상 저 트니. इन शौर्य से बच्चे इंसान इन मोबे गाजे शेने इन शौर्य से भी शौर्य से ज्यादा दंगा तो माजों शेने तेरे वाला करसा ये ये सुए किंग से मंबो से जे बन जे नंग ला से वो तेरे शेदा 다 자가지고로 당가 카가쿠게 명아로 자가지 요 말에
No.
중청보 마장시
Not really.
자가지 하도 체시 어디에 섬이야 지가 어디에 코나 가르사 코나 나와라 티바시 뭐 니히베 되는 다디 희게 이내레서 다 딘데 다르와 샤유세 좀 라야보요 말이 인 디레지 샤유세 예디에세 니 가베가지 셰야 돼 빼야 셰니 디레 셰베이나 이네 년중 상바다 과와지 등에 사야 매베시 디레시는 에네 코 샤유세 바인스 라비나 문에 샤유세 얘기도 되는 아니 이모샤도 차그레서
So we are in the middle of page 46. And Geshe's explanation is this, that if we don't follow the gradual training of the mind to cultivate compassion and bodhicitta, as explained in the authentic treatises, right? We just start off kind of like in a very abstract way, thinking about all sentient beings, and okay, I want to be Buddha for the sake of all these sentient beings. And maybe it is kind of based on some kind of random, partial instructions that we have gathered here and there, somewhere. That kind of practice and compassion is not going to go that far. Okay? And so it might, as a matter of fact, gives us this false impression, certain point, oh, I have bodhicitta now, right? So we become very conceited, like egomaniacs, right? Okay, now I'm a bodhisattva, really, I think so. Kind of sentient beings are beautiful here, and I have some compassion. So it just become an ego-generating, kind of a thought, and we really don't have the real bodhicitta. And then those who do have the real bodhicitta, based upon proper training and compassion, they look at us, they're going to laugh at us, like, oh my gosh, look at them, Where are those dodos come from, He didn't say that, but, I have to throw that in. So we should really, from the beginning, follow the right process and procedures to cultivate bodhicitta so that we don't become the dodo head, practitioners,
제가 디데지 가지 제도 편에도 그래. 가르쳐서 예지 샤주서 받아서 애니 깨바 장매 돼서 공부를 봤어. 제가 다다 내담보 되게 디데 쩨마시 시야 되게 애니 카페면서 타셔다로 왔어. 와도 제마들 배도 깨바 장매서 써사고 해 말아. 어디 어디 곰세야 돼다 샤주서 곰주 그게 가르사 다 람 주어서 애니 곰주 배 내려시고 해야 뭐야. 람 현다 공교 말을 쓰고 말했어. 그래와 샤주서도 인지도 공면 코나 공부해서 거기와 말했어. 그때 샤주서 공부 현다 공교 그랬어.
So he said that it's important for us to follow the proper process, the procedures to cultivate bodhicitta. Of course, our focus is on developing compassion and bodhicitta here, right? But this should not be meant to say like, okay, I don't need to do any other practice, just compassion and bodhicitta. That's not the message, okay? It doesn't mean we don't need to cultivate any other path. Yeah, maybe we do, right? But here, our focus is on cultivating compassion and bodhicitta, so therefore the emphasis is we should follow the right procedures to cultivate bodhicitta. And as we look at the bodhisattvas, and so they really train their mind for eons and eons, right, dedicated towards sentient beings. If it's that easy, what are they doing for eons, right? They don't need to do that. I mean, they could easily, they don't. So we look at them, we know that it takes a while to be able to cultivate these thoughts and to achieve our, achieve our goal. So there's no shortcut here and there,
어디다 가서 제일 항아시에도 용화 마제 장스 티버시 부들다 다다디 용화께는 검다 해서 다 제리야 아니 용화 마제 바는 그래 쩨마시네 이니 비상주세를 비게라 가서 뭐바시네 드네시네 돈바송 장동송 장동서들 현에 양조 중국 비상주세를 장야 이니 상사리 가서디 준주를 해샤시 그와 준주 담보디 신 다다다 등한테 상동제와라 이니 장주세 국마르세 라우니시 몽데디데 디모테요 말이 장주세 마제바 돈 상동 송야 열세야지도 어디 롱데레다 세다 어디 다디 디데 아니 다다 디주주 같아서 리우 당보디 편요시 디네 마 이니 몸저 디시 인 다다디 3대 리우레 이니 나게 김지고네 이니 비 신입급도다 장주세 장 냠도 셔야도 어디서 어디 제레스 다디시와라 인터가세 지금 뭐 tingin 야 아니 연락 조사야 더 잠조다 애니 응원조 애니 그 domba 톰도 흉을 퇴섬 시어 초마고 사고 그래서 그 저는 원인데 제요 말이지 신나 패치 제셔서 뒤져간 거 상고 뭐도 양 다가서 양 저는 뒤초리야 뭐가 지에메가 시 당보고 창동래 되네 줘요 말이지 어떻게
So we can look at cultivating bodhicitta, if you will, from two different perspectives or angles. One is from, experiential point of view, phenomenological point of view. My professors are speaking in my head, I guess. So it's lived experiences point of view, in other words. And or we can look at it from how should I say, sort of theoretical point of view, in the sense that even though we don't have the real bodhicitta now, but we make certain effort to generate it. It's called contrived bodhicitta, chema in Tibetan, right? And based upon that, we can receive the bodhisattva vows. So once we have received the bodhisattva vows, we make more commitment. Then we still have to train our mind to generate bodhicitta because we haven't had it yet, right? But that's another sort of a theoretical way to cultivate bodhicitta, right? We don't wait until we have all the experiences, but we follow that different routing. And so even in that case, as Geshe explained, there are other preliminary things. For example, if we look into Bodhisattva's way of life, Shantideva's, I think the beginning chapter is about the benefits of cultivating bodhicitta. And then he will talk about preliminary practices somewhere. And then there's a chapter on developing samadhi, concentration. But somewhere there he also explains, cultivating bodhicitta based upon equalizing, exchanging self for others, dakshin yamje in Tibetan, right? And so he combined that in that. So that means, we really need to generate a lot of merit, right? Sometimes, like in the Buddhist practice point of view, go for refuge in the three jewels, right? And do the other practices, purification practices, accumulate the merit. So all of these things are geared towards, right? It's an orientation towards cultivating, bodhicitta. Yeah.
어디에 다 그래서 들어 어디다 저주세 맞제바 domba 송야 들어 튕게 들어다 얘가 뭐 잠조시 저 엔더 랍자 해봐 어디에 튕게 뭐 보고 와 어디에 그 뭐도 양 뭐지 랍자 되게 처음에 완전 지금 말이 되고 있다 다 디너사 다 디브다 다 페이지 부가마 카기 람 세당 신사로 되는 람 줘봐 돈이도 애니 또 애니 되네야 지적 돈이도 해라 공이야 고배줘야지 되네 명점 해 누구서 형현다도 저거로 애니 저주sem도 공내니 공배도 저거야 되잖니 명점 민두스 제다디 저주sem자디 제다 계지 야와세지 강가 비게 포로지 명학 모두 이제 해게 어디 개 드바지고 버리네 되게 인지문지 공부도 로고고 제가 전주생 당하되면은 지금 말이지 어디서 모두 이제 해야 돼도 그래서 그래서 내가 자와세지 드바지 람파르지 명하되 정보도 니니 송발다 생각해보나 이따기 럼주디 해발 샤워서 어디다 전주생 종주데 에는 모두 이제 다도 전주 모두 이제 해고라 어디 해고래서요 그지 니 다다 따디 디래자 다 라마카지 이사로와 동이도 베셔라고 그래서 람금도 저주심께 되네 약 장하니 에는 거기 성지시가 되게 잡매 버와 어디 되게 잡매 되 동으로서 다 그리고
So even if we're with, I think one of the things that there's always, we have debate about things. Some people say in order to take the bodhisattva vows, you must have the real bodhicitta, otherwise you can't get bodhi, right? All of those debates going on. But the quote we find here is to substantiate that, if you have the right orientation, then you don't have to have the real bodhicitta to take the bodhisattva vows. Okay, so you can go with that, I call it theoretical perspective, genuinely, not fakingly, contrived bodhicitta, take bodhisattva vows on the basis of that, and then continue the training of the mind. So that's okay to do it. And then on the top of page 47, it is mentioned, as Geshe explained, that in the past, some lamas seems to emphasize quite a bit about, generating understanding of emptiness and how to enhance that understanding and knowledge. But they don't seem to really talk about generating bodhicitta and how to enhance it or combining bodhicitta with emptiness. Yeah, and here the Rinpoche comes kind of a little hard on them, like they got it wrong. He didn't say it straight like that. Maybe I'm becoming American translator, but it's diplomatic. But he said no, that's not right, because bodhicitta development is essential for achieving Buddhahood. Yeah, and so he refers to Maitreya's ornament for clear realizations, Abhisamaya Alankara, Ngundok in Tibetan, where they talk about different types of cultivating bodhicitta. And as a matter of fact, we find really extensive instruction on cultivating bodhicitta in Maitreya's ornament for clear realization. So that should be our source of knowledge, and use it to be able to cultivate bodhicitta properly and enhance it.
Shows that's Laxum Jadi, Sumba Laxum, the Chamba, the Ninja Gum, Takiwa, Jama Dal, La Duji, Simja did that, Shida, the Pumba, Dungan, Nan, did that Kaje, Simja doing something bad, that came so easy with Yawaza, and Titan, that did doing it at the issue with those. What tells that the Machida training in, so the Simja Dewan did doing it into some of your teaching what Sigmas, the Laxum did that, doing it to tell on Yesha was the one game goes and cannot go or make it the one there is doing it, so didn't Pengo Marva. No. But in the law, Chicksha was Yago, no. Kasanga Shumu, and then it, them but the water tail doing the Yambi, Shabbat Mijogi, Simjin dog, double Yambi. In somebody Shamba the Ninja so said that Laxum Laxum did what he took Shabo with the gas the other than doing the 10 some shop.
So in the middle of page 47, now next caption reads, the cultivation of wholehearted resolve, Laksam in Tibetan, or I call it special willpower. And so after great compassion comes the wholehearted resolve, or the laksam. Yeah? And at this point, our experience of compassion, love and compassion are very intensified, to the extent they induce in our mind this personal sense of responsibility that I would like to do what I can to promote the happiness and to end the suffering for sentient beings. Earlier, when we are training our mind, right, in the beginning, recognizing all sentient beings as having been our parents, right? Remember their kindness, repaying their kindness, all of those things. Yes, we do develop certain sense of love and compassion, but that's not strong enough. Maybe it's more like, how nice if sentient beings are happy. How nice if they don't have any problem, right? That kind of love and compassion. But as we train our mind and reach this stage where really now we have developed quite a strong sense of love and compassion for sentient beings. So they induce in us the sense of resolve that I want to do. May I be able to bring happiness to sentient beings? May I be able to help sentient beings end suffering? So that kind of willpower arises in our mind.
Oh, dear, what did you that the house of there? Ninja debate, Ninja two words you were going to do the two, the Tsuntum Gangal Gomni. In the country, house made a Shukshamu Shawarwa, Tinju go to the Masha Tunzureva. They go better. She said, Tin to the Ganga Gongre, Ninja Jigo, my Laxum in that country, not that the Lam Gunga Ganga, Tin to the Ninga Gongre.
And another important message is when we cultivate love, compassion, and wholehearted resolve, we should try to do that across different situations, whether we are in a meditative session or outside the sessions, right? In between the sessions, as we say. As a matter of fact, in between sessions are much longer than the sessions, isn't it? Seems like in between sessions are the real time of most of the time we spend. So if we only think about cultivating love and compassion and wholehearted resolve in the meditative session, and then forget about them in between the sessions, those are too long. So we need to carry them over in that session and maintain it. Try to, because we need to think across the situations in whatever possible ways to generate, to intensify our love, compassion, and wholehearted resolve.
어디를 가서 제제다 로모지 버터라고 셈님 힘은 도미 뒤진 가서 셈이 힘은 도마미 뒤진 유목하래 그에 랭거바 러시아어바 뭐네 연대시에 티비지 지를 조르시에 로션도 카베 틱틱 도모치 못 따버려 쉐라 쉐라 불구도 특별히 좀 루비 아니 ngor 민주 민요바다 뉴문비 코아 어느 고비 심규라 참바디 닝제 라서베 연대 고바 유릉도 우리 유 통동리 장 지영 민주와 송바다 인베스 연대도 고고 디레다 가제 제도 연대도 고문 비게 때때서 고는 미미메 디레 가제 다 띠그더라고 지 빼네 다 부름으로 가지고 같이 찍을야 틱다 khoa be chhe di na en del chitik de be shige de jig da ne go ga mo sha ko ma wa che de go be shi yun sin shi go ji wa o de le sha da jing je gu ya dia ne thong ma me ba sim jing bi ge da so de jing ji da xie ye wa to ya ji mo de sim jing ying ji sho de pie da gong gong wa da tie de so da so ku de che de tin de de sa de yin ga ko ne me ji tin de de go ya ma yo ge ya na de go ma de shi wa da ga ji.
So we are on top of page 48. There is a stanza quoted from the work of a great Indian master, Chandra Gomin. And so Geshe explains that for us, because our usual orientation of the mind is really not to wish others to be happy, to wish others to be free of suffering, isn't it? So it requires a lot of consistent effort. Like consistency is very important across the situations, whether we are in meditations or we are outside meditation in between, so that we are able to maintain the continuity of our practice and generate those attitudes. Otherwise, if we only do in the meditation and not between the sessions, we may not be able to generate it strong enough. And I think example given here is. If there's a kind of a bitter juice, right, to sweeten it, it's not enough to put a few drops of sweet things. You have to put enough amount so that, right, maybe you need to stir it consistently so that everything gets mixed and then they are sweet enough. So in the same way, we have to do the maintenance work, at least, if across the situations.
어디 그래서 그 뒤에 나 이번 소주 도는 예 로정원네 ngārshībē sē bē ngārshībē dēni xēndōng tōng shōngshū gōba tōng tē tōba dēbi jēba yīmī wōng jē tē tā jī mē shō pārī jiam zhū gāba xēba tār gūsum dā chīlīng yuñ dēn sābē gōni sō tōng mār tēba pēwā jē tēne tēba dī dōmbā jēba rī sōng bē 요네 드다 닝라 타바니 타바데베 게데 롱 통나 다디레 사슴지게 게네 네 조정 타비 돼야 돼 다가서 조정 타고 상 가지고 리고 말해서 거다 근데 롱동 때나 조정 타고야 다도 타자 말로 성제 타고야 근데 현동을 받에나 네 조정 타고야 어 디데 그좀 제와 텔레 강가 상어도 비게 조정 타고야 근데 요새 망보 다네 이네 어디 섬 조정 통도 있고 그래서 다 조정 타고 거스 다서 다스미 동에 조정 타고 거스 안 되고 미국 용용도 진짜 말이죠.
So we are in the middle of page 48. The next caption reads, training the mind to be intent on enlightenment. Yeah, so that's like seeking enlightenment. Remember, bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment is accompanied by two types of aspiration or intentions, right? To promote the well-being of others and to seek enlightenment as a means to the end. And so here, again, the advice is that it's not enough for us to simply generate this kind of thought, yes, I want to become Buddha for sentient beings, I want to become Buddha for sentient. That's not good enough. We have to think in many different ways and reasons why, right, we should seek enlightenment. And so there are two reasons. We should seek enlightenment in order to benefit all other sentient beings just the way we want to, right? For the sake of others, there are many reasons why we should become Buddha and don't settle for less. But for our own sake, right, we should seek Buddhahood and don't settle for less, because otherwise we will not have fulfilled all our dreams and aspirations as well. So we have to take into account many different reasonings and thinking, promote deep and profound, extensive thinking why we should strive for enlightenment. Okay, so in that way, our aspiration-seeking enlightenment becomes very strong and stable.
어디 다 심지자 기진의 심지자 교시의 建기시야 무슨 그거 해서 제가 들어 몽보 요르디 조조데 단다데 에네 비게 해 심지를 봐때는 라 조조 타고야 소소이나 조조 타고야 근데 어 디력 유대서 소소 랑도 불러도 흉도 소 비게 깨베이나 엔티 야가요 디시 시작에 도세도 송야서 거다
And earlier earlier we talked about how, creating 4 different causes or the conditions we can generate bodhicitta and all of that. But among all of these things, really the more important ones are, just like we talked about now, that we should explore different reasons why, for the sake of others, for one's own sake, we should strive for enlightenment or Buddhahood. Okay, so that seems to be major cause for generating bodhicitta. And he also here mentions that we think about the qualities, enlightened qualities of Buddha's body, speech, and mind, and how Buddhas are able to do so much for sentient beings, and that will spark our interest why we should seek enlightenment.
어디에 다 가지 가서 남지 저주세면 듬바니 된지 쓰고발. 현도도 말한도 많이요. 어디게 어디 다다디게 되게 삼다 깨고 간지 현도 신나라. 에네 사지고 뭐던데 셰드면도야. 근데 랑도 신나 다다 에니 디바 뉴저 방에 뭐 타바도나 뉴저 방에 뭐도 지네 에니 그게 시대 방요 말아. 시대 딱 가르치는 말들 소소 때는다 현도 때는다 에니 상예 고모도 뭐도 카메라에 야서 랑도도 봐서 저주dom도 소소로와. 현도도 봐 현상이 살는 거 되더라. 뭐 디기 숙심 뭐 찍리시는 게 뭐래서 그래서. 어디는 너만 인데 심기리 지금데.
So as we technically defined bodhicitta, or the mind of enlightenment, as a primary state of mind characterized by or accompanied by 2 types of aspirations, intentions, right? Aspiration seeking others' well-being and aspiration seeking enlightenment. So we have to find all possible ways to think about why, for the sake of others and self, we must not settle for less than enlightenment. Okay? And why for others? Because we know that enlightened beings or Buddhas are the ones who are able to do the most for sentient beings, isn't it? And no other realized beings less than enlightened ones are able to do that much. And for our own sake, let's say if we settle for nirvana, and we achieve nirvana when we are free from all the afflictive emotions or delusions, isn't it? But we still have obscuration to omniscience, knowledge. So we are limited in many ways, isn't it? For our own sake, we are still not half work done, but half not done. Okay? So thinking in all these different ways, so we should intensify our 2 aspirations to make our bodhicitta, to strengthen our bodhicitta.
어디 다 거기 사지디 가서 곰베 림발 녜바께 와서야디 사지 되래. 다 윤제 명아 디디야 찍라 다디 녜바께다 도스야요디잖아. 엔디 든도고도 거제가 저주서 제가 라송 닝제로 애니 영무 잡아고 그러 영무 잡발다 되네는 제소지 되네 진전시 되네 말시 와시 되네 따님 거 와시 어디버도 야도 되고로 와 제가 어디 되네 다도 되도 거제 가다 저다 그게 저주서 뭐니 곰게 좀 있나 애니 레준데다 잡스 좋아다 저도 강가 너도 저거 해서 애니 다 집이 중국간이 셰베 애니 녀송 동에 기다 렌제선아 강가 저주선바는 양선행 거도 저도 som자 좀 기한이 저야면 다 녀송 동에 접시 그 녀송 동에 제가 고점비 애도 상제 모두 파두게 되게 그게 그래서 개견서 등여 주야돼 애니 강사직 ra 상집에 돈달이야 인당아 차 어때 디스고다
also,
어때 디차서는
also.
nda데 걸사 승람을 당아 차서 차고로
Claro.
티면 다 집시무레스 디 인도리 디 티바시무레스 이세나 걸사 승람을 당아 차도 말아
No.
제가 다디 윤제 림바디 거네 다서 저스 징게나 다 인소 등에네 고통은 상고야 차서 어때 인지면지 어디 다 이해하고 저 등사다 인식시보다 정신시보다 돈이도 싫어도 양지 나와 로봇이 요러와 인소 등에도 거기 등에서 난 기다 나와 그래서 요라 제가 다디 숨자자 자네요 말했어 어디 인주지 돼서 그랬어
So when we look back on some of the main outlines, all the things we just talked about relates to a major outline where it's called Gomrum Nyeba, that we have to cultivate bodhicitta in a what called sequential order. And that sequential order is what called defined sequential order. Okay? And that's very important. And so which means when we look at the 6 causes and 1 result sequential order practice, so we follow it from the beginning, right? Actually, we start from cultivating a sense of equanimity or balanced state of mind, okay, or what was they called, impartiality or something here, right? So that's where it starts. And then we go with recognizing all sentient beings as having been our kind mothers, remembering their kindness, thinking of repaying their kindness, isn't it? And then we generate that affectionate love, yeah? And then we generate compassion, and then the wholehearted resolve, and then bodhicitta, isn't it? So this sequential order is very important to follow in the training of our mind. But this is not just enough. Actually, all the things we talked about in the Lamrim is related to cultivating bodhicitta, right? When we think in terms of 3 types of practitioners, small, middle, and advanced, or the initial, intermediate, or the advanced, whichever we want to talk about, all the things talked about this, right, these practices, context, are to be understood as personal instruction for each of us to become Buddha, right? If we understand that, because one of the salient features of Lamrim is, taking all the teachings of Buddha as personal instruction for me, okay? Otherwise, if you think like, those like, going for refuge and thinking about the suffering of 3 bad migrations, okay, those small practitioners, where are they, then? And then the next one level is, that's the intermediate one, the bunch of people there, right? Then I'm kind of here on this side, like advanced level. If we kind of segment this, then we have really failed to understand how all Buddha's teachings are meant to be personal instructions for me to go from the gecko to the enlightened state. Because I said this belongs to that and that belongs to that. I'm somewhere here, right? We are nowhere, isn't it? So that's why it's very important for us to understand, as Geshe is trying to emphasize this. But even when we reflect on the suffering of 3 bad migrations, right, to be free from that, with small practitioners thinking, but that is also important to understand the suffering of sentient beings, to develop compassion for them, isn't it? So we have to be able to see the connection through all that. Let me see. So basically, everything talked about in Lamrim, starting with the initial level practitioners, thinking about the suffering of 3 bad migrations, going for refuge, observing the law of karmic action and causes, right? Then moving to the next level. All of these things looks like 3 different levels, but they are integrated practice for one individual practitioners to go from the starting point all the way to the enlightened state. If we understand that, then we have understood what it means to say all the teachings of Buddha are personal instructions, okay, for one.
living of Geshe done. In the big bong we do me as I think Kaye big any or something you show sense of Matashe, in the Yidum Shashamogum you say out of share or this is done. Didn't be Hashambol or
No.
to the Katuka the Yama soon did me noting to that the Katuka soon the go, Kongan for Lam Tumon so and Lamsat Michakisha with the Digrava. That is the most of the Shakisham Golia song there. Why should the Takum said, should the hello that the Gilukum fish or the Chulish dog, the husband John Jew, there was such a video. But the money transfer me, John Jew, Jew or so Chazan let you over that it is in get Nundu get the Jew or what the young guy, Lizin of Jew is Lam do the bonding, Tata swim or later money. What is the Daniel Rashadio? So I think I'm not your Rashadia in the so the book and join. The gem was such a meeting. My you got Yamara.
No.
What did it? The team with the tail jaw.
No. So Dr. Geshe says that one of the very unique sort of attributes of Rinpoche or Lama Tsongkhapa Manjushri is that in his works, especially Lamrim, he has structured everything in such a way that easy to follow what needs to be done at the beginning and what follows next. Right? Everything is structured in the way it should be. So in one sense, it's kind of ready-made food for us to be able to follow that quite easily. Otherwise, we cannot say that Rinpoche is kind of, how should I say, holier than some other lamas or in other traditions, because those who are realized, probably they are on the same level, but sometimes what we find in some, the way lamas are doing is that, they will just focus too much on one practice, right? They just give you initiation of this deity and then just right like boom. Nothing works like that, unless the people who receive this initiation have good training in the preliminary practice, all the things. Okay, maybe this is where they should start, right? But otherwise, in the middle of nowhere, you just give this initiation like, oh, here's a Mahamudra for you, this is great. Like, yeah, thank you very much, So where do you go? Whereas Rinpoche, right, he starts from the beginning, right, and all the way to the end. He shows everything in a very clear, structured way, and that was one of his unique attributes and qualities. So if we follow that way, we cannot go wrong, So that's Geshe want to emphasize. And also, as Geshe said before, I something left from the previous explanation, is when we look at the teaching as not something in the segments meant for this people, that people, and for me, but all the teaching is meant for me, one individual practitioners, how to go from the starting point all the way to the end line, destination. Then we really understand what it means to say that Buddha's teaching is a personal instruction for me. Okay. Otherwise, today, some people, or maybe ourselves might be that everybody loves to hear about great compassion, bodhicitta, right? Emptiness, right? We kind of love those teachings. And then we talk about suffering like, no, I'm not going to that one, right? Well, we got a problem, right? Because that teaching is an important part of generating compassion. So if we don't, ignore those parts and only go to the kind of pick and choose things, so we haven't really understood what it means that the teaching is a personal instruction from me. Okay, so that's what he wants to emphasize. Yeah. Well, we will stop there today, and we would like to welcome your questions and observations. The traveling mic is over there. Let me get the page number down. Thank
you. One of the challenges that comes to mind for aspiring to go to enlightenment. Well, the difficult part is we don't know what that's like.
Right.
And if, as practitioners, we have been cultivating love and compassion and also reducing the delusions, so we know it's a state that has less of that delusions and none of that suffering and none of that, it's more like a not this,
Right.
but we don't know what it actually is, but we know what it's not.
Right.
So how do we deal with that? Or is that enough to just stand there?
Okay. Mora kandi shwe de dire kin ta kari shura ta 다 dumba 전주 쌤데 키 콤네스다 산제 콤바 돈데 니가 어와게 예 다 돈다 야고 챤나 산제 고바 세겐데 토베나 가리 요메데 다도 소소 냠뇽 키 셰요 말와게 델레베나 가리 요메로와 이나 고 이제르 셰도데 거와 다 이네 디 이제 셰베 켄기 다 조드 가르선 즉 소소기 뒤로 예베기 다 뇨몬데 좀아데 충르타야다 다 디직 셰도 거와게 아 제자 안에 디체데 딘데 체바 잠데기 코란 산제 고반 로알 딕데기 어레 야메나 산제 고반 토베 나르와게 다지 지금 딘데 쇼얼 삼지 고쳐 고월스 그서와게
네, 다 리뷰 테스거래. 푸소서거래 셴나? 애네 상점기 대뉴다. 어디네 대노 만도 또 태워 그래서도와. 다 상주세 받도 비춰발 애네 배 보도 좀 가도 강라 지바도 예제까지 쥐어줘라. 뒤직세. 다 되는 상제기 용대도 해고. 다가 상제를 튼도 가서 예미기. 상제다 스미타이 동에다 상제고 런독시아 하고 거와. 대하고 상제기 용대 가서 어떻게 해고 그러. 근데 저는 되게 해고. 다다다 파지가 다 상미 가서 그것도 상미 이게 가서 상미 이게 이제 세야죠. 어디에 여러데 다 가래 있는 만 간주 수업지 다 가제 남주인은 상제 그것도 용대다 배 가져가는 것도 럽스 신고로 다 딘데지 다 건조되지는 되게 이제 셰자다 다 럽스 셰자 있는데 상계dom도 돼 축셔모 처음 하러 와. 다 니즈 약고 셰서는 디디 톰도 셴모 처음 와. 어디 름바데 힘을 다 먼저 bên 인지 셴모이나 인지 셴모 강가 찍고 말아. 몇 주유나 니가 맨다 름바 주 샤초로 인지 셴모. 그러와 그 니지 셴모 체 롱데나 고 축셔로다 융로 가가 열어 와. 어디나 이 간직 상직 연대 가지 셰체나 대제기야 상계 톰도 셰그러 와. 다디 윷 가르스네 예지 좋아라 셔르스 퍼진조 롭스 셴고 그러 와. 어디서 약보 스토저는 에네 베게 정수심 젠데다 상계 톰도 롭시 야가 나 가지 가지 셰나 디다 가서 형제부 베 투자집 상수 되는 모두 로도 말아 봐. 진짜 다 공유 소용으로 돼서 열어. 어떻게 같이 장입니다.
So what Geshe says is that yeah, we may not necessarily know what it is for last part, but whatever understanding we have, that is important. But then also, in whatever ways we can enhance the understanding, we should try to do that. So he was saying, how in the Buddhist literature, they talk about how we really need to educate ourselves in the whole Bodhisattva literatures, and what kind of sacrifices and dedications Bodhisattvas bring, even sacrifices their, parts of the body, all of those things. So to the extent we get informed about those things, that helps us to generate stronger determination and stabilize our aspiration-seeking enlightenment. But to the extent our knowledge is limited, it's to that extent, maybe our aspiration is not as strong as somebody else's aspiration who knows more about it. The example Geshe has given is, let's say we can think of 10 people, let's assume all 10 people have generated compassion. Okay? Yes, so everybody has compassion. But still we will find some kind of a qualitative differences among these 10 compassions. Some people, maybe their compassion is stronger or than the others because of the way they're able to think critically and many extensive ways. Whereas others is limited because of so that kind of qualitative difference we find. But to answer your question is, so we should do what we can to enhance our knowledge, understanding. But it's okay, right, not to know everything about what is, in that sense. And of course, that's why in the monastic education system, they study everything in detail and debate about it. For example, in the Pranjana Paramita studies or the wisdom gone beyond cities, they talk about all the Buddha qualities, isn't it? There's like 21, exalted wisdom types. The more we are educated about that, then that will also strengthen our aspiration-seeking Buddha wisdom, isn't it? The less we know about that, we kind of believe in that. Okay, Buddha is that. So it is a little different, in that sense. So we should do what we can to expand our knowledge.
설지적으로 와 배는 되어 노아롱송도 배다 롱바도 되게 힘도 매도 강가 배 매다 인디에 자존도 로 자지 뚝뚝 다시 인디네 죽다 뒤도 지게 사자 가와리에서나 인 사자 내레스 어디데 내가 열서도 와 어디 노아롱송 여기다 더 챔베샤르시는 데레다 그래서 다다 되시 다 쯔샤르시는 and the magic be put do what she over tele, and Sanji is in Jetamili Yapa, Ninja the Teleya, any Chucha, Teta Tuzuma, put doing him as almost maybe. Sanji is in Ninjas that and Matic put do what Telia, and to say tell Ninja Shira. The Indian Mag put those Ninja the Chong, Sanji in the chairs, you are. That Tele and Chinaneta, you might say you got any Daja Magoyada, in Tata Shabbat of Kazichidan, Dirshigora, Sanji, but mid Jagger to art of Chikuna. In the deal, Sanji Sundijil, Midja so gale, Kotoda, for the Tele and Dead of Yoro, that Jidan and the Digo, that Sanji, but get up to Lojun of the day, Shana Kanji, or Tails, Laringo, Loju, Sanji, your name, Lojun Rabo. In the landing, Lojun Rabo, Tidagonta, Shungshabo, Jashabo to a machine, and Tidagon, Lavin, Tobacco, today's young Simon Day,
So the point is, Geshe is trying to make is, the more we learn about enlightened qualities of body, speech, and mind, and enlightened activity, to that extent, we will be more inspired, and our aspirations can be strengthened. And so examples like, say, for example, Buddha's wisdom is something that can know phenomenon at the deepest, subtlest level, like a very subatomic level, right? And let's say, in one of the Vinaya texts called Dua Lung, transmission of the Vinaya, it's mentioned that if we cut down all the trees in the world and we burn them and then we dump the whole dust into the ocean, and then somewhere if we are able to pick up one dust, like we asked Buddha, right, where is this from? So Buddha's mind should be able to recall, right, what it is. So Buddha's wisdom is very deep and profound. Or that in terms of compassion and love, the example we use is a loving mother's love and compassion for her only child, right? But if you compare that love and compassion to Buddha's love and compassion for sentient beings, and Buddha's love and compassion much stronger than that, and there is no other example to even illustrate that point. Or in terms of Buddha's enlightened activity, we said that, if 100 people ask, different questions to Buddha all at the same time, Buddha can answer in one way that everybody gets their own answers in the respect. So these are the enlightened qualities, So if we think about those different qualities, then our aspiration-seeking Buddhahood becomes really more grounded and stabilized and things like that. And then sometimes that's why in the monastery, they are really dedicated to study the metaphysics and the logic and texts like that. But sometimes the teachers would say, maybe you should read the Gyeltsen life stories of the Buddha, how Buddhas in different lifetimes sacrificed so much for sentient beings, because that will inform, right, your practice in a different way. Yes, there. Yeah, you can ask. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
Hello?
Yeah.
I understand that there's a process, and especially in light of what was just said, my question is about the guru and the place of the guru in this process, because you mentioned it's not his word, but the dodoheadism, the dodoheadism, I think it was, right?
I said dodoheads, yeah.
Well, at what point, we're able to make the judgment that we're capable of moving to the next part of the process in the educational system?
Okay.
Is that really possible without a guru or a type of guru to vet? Because
Sure,
I frequently think I've got it.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
But I'm listening to something that's maybe not so
right.
reliable.
Yes. Sure. Kora kan show de de ta tanda pena chanju sem ke ra bichina nganju chunde menga dong jen kor kurim nge jen jito de gorwa ke sidu kan ya ta tanda di na ya pena ane pena ta kewe shinye sa jorwa ke tin nyang ka de kawali gores pena da so korim nge jen chi lo chang da be na so rang da ke ta nga pena ta kholan di de lama sa pena ma she ke sa ro ke ta tin den ka ro ko sam ro wa lama la ma den ba je so go chue tu ya chi yo re ya ma na lama sten lama de kan de sten go ro wa ke ro di kin den ka ro khare chi so ro na di me so sam ro ta nga pe je ma she de ke sa yin sam ten cho go de so wa ke ta ngone yi me ta gu ma ro wa ke
de 지도 다 신이 되세야 돼. 개체부 힘지 돼. 개체부세. 애니 가르자 유래께 하고 쉐야 하고 다 참여를 넣는 장이도 이해도 되더라.
그래서
아시래다 신이다 말에도 용 말아 봐. 저 너무 신이 때 뭐라 봐. 근데 신이 때다 노조 건데 피지 신이 때 되나. 근데 갈라가를 수도 페이지 해 도고 그래서 그도. 다른 막 예용지 고만지 여기 무슨 노조를 때 자그래 가서 지나 인 소대 신나 신예 방한테 못에 마대나는 인 소로토 말이지.
No, so.
도저 다 당보대 되고로 와.
Claro.
인 가좀 다 페지 수수 페지 로토야서 차그래스.
No,
저 어딘데로 지래 저다 신예들 인지 뭐 되는데 그거로 와. 또 신예 때네 다 신예가 라샤가 강을다 소소랑 사무당은 비게 네바도 도야 어디 쪽에서 당기때 되세요 와.
claro.
tipo de redes da timbre sam chida de ko pendo jara yo ba da ko kosun jura ji mari de jodo gro wa
Claro.
da so sam don de oni ja yan de je yu nduk sin gu so ju de semi nge yo no in jura yo mar ba
Claro.
je de cheda lap sha ba da so so sam no gi so da ka ga ya ra
Claro.
o de tong gro wa
No.
so de xin ye ten de yang gro es
Yes. Of course, in the Buddhism, special Tibetan Buddhism, which you call cultivating qualified spiritual guru is very, very important. You know, it's very difficult to overemphasize the importance of guru, right? But that, and that's why, in some sense, from Lamling practice point of view, developing the associated realization with the guru devotion practice is a very difficult one, you know, to be able to have that kind of realization. But that said, of course, it's important for us to find a qualified guru and then receive the teaching, authentic, right? And then I think much is really what we're talking about. It depends upon your own analytical thinking, right, to be able to process the information and to be able to, check it with your own experiences. Okay, this is what the guru said. That's what the authentic text says. You know, am I really there? Isn't it? And so one of the great teachers, he said that in the case of discourse practices, sutrayana practice development, if you meet a qualified teacher, receive authentic instruction, you remember that, and then you use a critical intelligence, you should be able to figure out usually, right, what's the next stage, where are you, right? Of course, you can take help a little bit, not all the time, do that. But in terms of the tantric practice and realization, he said that it's very important to often check with one's gurus, right? That's what the great masters said. And so you listen to guru, you hear their teaching, but still it is a very intellectual level, isn't it? But we have to really deeply think, contemplate, and take it to the depth level, deep personal level, right? And then experiences we need to generate it. So when you gain the experiences with your own analytical thinking, you should be able to figure out, okay, what level you are and what next you should be able to go. Yeah. Any other? Yeah, Vladimir. Yeah.
The question is about meditating on developing compassion. So my understanding is that first we seek the object of meditation on compassion, which is some kind of a feeling that emerges as a result of analytical meditation. And upon finding that feeling, this becomes the object of meditation. So before we do analytical meditation, we cannot find the object, and we cannot actually meditate on compassion. Is that correct? And finding the object is this when we get on the first stage of meditation?
Okay, so now are you thinking about like compassion combined with emptiness, something? No.
No,
Okay.
Nothing to do with that.
Okay, first stage. Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
about the analytical
Okay, I got it.
meditation.
Yeah. Kurang show the dire ta taki pena nyingji chedu kalia nyingji ki mingnam chongor wa gen.
o de
Chedu kalia ane kurang sada ta nyingji ki mikwa nye di ane cheba chene wa ge. Nye sona ane mikwa shio ma da tangbo cheba ma chang ane nyingji mikwa yo mar wa mebar chagu mar wa so wa ge.
je ba ma shin de
nyingji meba me da cheba chene ane chi nye yung wa ge.
Ore.
Chi kaso da chorwa ra chi ma se ke yin do kala ta nyingji mikwa nye ba so wa
o
ge.
de
Di meba ina ale mikwa me tinga ru cha de go mar so ge.
근데 다 되게 그래 제바시세야 되게 다 가제 심진 닝제고야 유대지 고고로 와
Lare,
유대들 제바시 고로 와
lare.
저 닝다 유대들 가르세나 에네 소소 마시에 틴틴 데라 렌지 마야 자 통마모 틴체다 장고선 다 다리 틴지야 저지 그게 소소 키디 고로 와
Lare,
어 데다 제금스네 데려와
lare,
어디로
lare.
다 dinle 봐서 아 딱문에 자나 지금 심지에 더 맞이 탑 문득 좀 삼네 그게 냐말 줘야 저 또 제금스야 유전 삼을 동안 좀 현가요 말와 제가 심지에야 소득까지셔야다 dinle 저 통마모 데 맞음나나 남서 심지에 인기 지금 말아
Tati ko jogong ki mingnam cha de jiro.
다 제금시 되게 제금시다 다 다랑 때 조금씩 배 동행 terror이나서 담보 태우고 유대 먹어 산 거로.
Lare.
다들 삼들 다 terror이나 됐는지 많은 사람 뒤갈배 삼론부터 한때 조금씩 그래서.
Lare.
야 양자야 삼었다 조금 빼는 식으로 쓰기도.
No, okay. Da mena ke di sam so konza pana mashe thinde dinde ke junze ma sam che. Semje thamje so sam dana ko ningji mi ko chagor chago mar da ke. Nga semje thamje ko chipo mar sam chagor wa ke.
네.
De chena ningji mi kwar jor yo mar da.
심지어 샤그리다 심지어 다시 배 누가 들어오시다 사마들 산다 다들 되기 제로스가 띠띠게 가서 쇼케도 좀 패도 말이죠. 거야 곰 야야 저디야 패야지 오도 말아. 오도 말이야. 레레니 파도 스톤 다샤제비나 이네 좋을 때 못 샤그리시다. 어디 스탄가도 심지어 닝제 사마한테 간다 요요로 왔다. 디벤도 왔다.
I think what Geshe is saying is, where the analytical meditation is important, using compassion as a practice, is we, think critically all the reasons why sentient beings are important to us, and so that's why we have that deep connection, mother-child relationship, right? The kindness, all of this. So considering those reasons analytically, then I think we really feel much more connected to the focus of the compassion or the subject of the compassion. If we don't think those thinking, right, we just simply think of sentient beings, right? We have some kind of vague focus for our compassion, but it's not good enough. But thinking about, generating compassion for this abstract notion of sentient being is not going to take us that far. For example, all of us have some seed of compassion and love, right? But to be able to really make it strong and lively, that we think about all those reasons why sentient beings are important to us and what connection we have. So that's why it's through analytical meditation we can find those reasons and we can convince ourselves, right, that sentient beings are important. Focus for developing compassion. Does that answer your question? Not at all.
Exactly. My question was how to distinguish, in the context of talking about analytical meditation on suffering,
right?
How this will actually generate some kind of a feeling. I think that's the way it was explained. And so the distinction is between the analytical meditation and placement meditation.
Right, yes.
So the placement meditation is on what? What is the object of placement meditation? Sure. And from the explanation, I gathered that it's some kind of a feeling which emerges as a result of meditating on suffering.
Hala kona tagi dire de chencho pemal kum se joro wa
어디
chencho pemal kum de kan ya ta chaba chi de kan ya semjen and tungen na zu de samin de kan tungen sam be kyen jen chowa sting go wa ge
어디
so chowa de ten de kan la ta chegum che se de kan le chowa ta ga de ko랑 그 네가 셈데 샤샤고래 제공 미바 가르쳐 고서 아까서 조금 미바 뭐다게 조금
왔다
단단히 제공 전에 셈제 동안 나베 제공 제로 와 네가 초바 시키고 와게 초바 디다 내가 같이 찾아러 와 셈제 단데다 딘데 동안 나샤다 데데 테나 섬에 저러 와다 조금 지도 갈 초바 디가리아 셈데 자셔 가르쳐 고서
다 조금 지도 때문에 동안데 테러시나 삼도야 야면 제가 나 샤워 사바도 오도 샤고라 당기데 저지 som는지도 어디 샤고다 이제 뭔가 사는데 디사 데시도 다 맞에 타면도 삼성지 쟁거로 와 디도 제가 싫어시나 삼면 디도 뭐가 샤베이나 조금으로 와 야 디셈 배 네금 하러 와 저도 야 지금 어디 저거래
Geshe says that yes, we consider the suffering of sentient beings, and that generates strong, right, feeling. How nice it would be if sentient beings are free of suffering. Okay, and so may they be free from suffering. May I be able to do that, right? So through the analytical process, when we generate those feelings strongly, we try to the placement meditation or several messages try to keep our mind stay in that. How nice if sentient beings are free from suffering, or may I be able, as long as we can hold that thought. But then our mind gets distracted again. Then we have to do analytical meditation to generate those feelings and, do the placement meditation. Yeah.
So is it to find that object of placement meditation? It seems to me that there has to be a lot of analytical meditation before we generate some kind of a strong feeling.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just by saying from the very beginning how nice it would be if they were free from suffering, that's not the way to go.
Right. 대체도 가다 단다디 조금 쳐서 섬들 가려야 조금 제백이 떡이 소화되게 된 딜리에 조금씩으로 왔죠. 조금 맞으면 조금 제매 등을 찾고 있어서 되지.
조금 맞으나 내가 등에 들어시나 선을 꼭 휴식 모용하여 말아. 등에 나야 유대도 삼난 휴식 모용거라. 어때? 지금 생각
Yeah, I think the analytical meditation kind of intensifies our feeling and compassion. So without that, if we simply say how nice if sentient beings are free, right, we could generate some sense of compassion, but not strong enough. Yeah.
타기대 성모서 가서 동해 엔디 야자 주송을 했어. 내가 특두래. 그래서 동해 가서 망아 삼나 닌제 망아 지게 유 가서 이런 닌제 효시가 지게 있어서 어땠어? 다 제금 선택해.
Right. So where, somewhere it mentioned that if we think about, 100 times 10 sufferings, right? Because in each suffering might help you to generate a stronger feeling of, compassion. And so the more suffering we think about, the stronger compassion, we tend to generate. That's what it is. Thank you very much. Geshe la ngi this condition chocho. Tanda di tuwa Geshe tala. Tanda di nyungne yorwa. 디 단다 간댕한 좀 님은디 명년에 추정 아바 차기도 와 얼마다 한 초아도 사 추정 된데 시작부터 대대거든 그래서 양산이 쇼하고 싶으신 거로 해서 초아 차가 당등 말해 오케이 배나 추정 아바 윤에 차로 와한 추정 된 시작부터 그래서 고도 양산이 낭 로드 추정 고바 주바 차가 양산이 쇼하고 싶으신 거로서 괜찮은 게
근데 카드를 치도 체크해서 총는 이거 있지.
저러 봐. 그래서
다들 찾아지는 용기도 이제로 와. 그래서 내가 잘.
그래서 망아바 차버도 내가 차가를 야 소소하잖아. 아니 주차가 좀 차로 와. 나로. 맞아. 먼저 뒤에 차가 봐도 그데 아니 나를 주어서 야산 쇼하고 용거로게.
네, 대대 육내 마대고서 인디도 페로 실세 돼. 거세게 시는 거
봐. 맞아. 오케이.
난가 말랑
어디다 쇼가 버려요. 어디다 가서 쇼가래. 추정가 다데
되게 알레 되게
나도 차가를 다 갖다 치고 와. 그래서. Okay. I just try to confirm something because I thought we need to change a little bit here. Anyway. Announcements again, the re-announcement if you will. Next weekend, so there's not going to be regular teaching Sunday. It's going to be Buddha of Compassion fasting retreat. We call it Nyungne. And so it starts on December 5th, Saturday. It'll start at 5:30 sharp because before the sun really comes out, we need to take the vows and things like that. And we'll finish off the day by 5. Okay. And December 5th is Lama Tsongkhapa Day. Lama Tsongkhapa's anniversary day, and we also mark that with chalk offering, feast offering thing. But here it says 7:30. I said, why don't we change to 5:30? Otherwise, you will be hanging out here at 7:30. You go home by 10, then you have to come back next morning early, right? That makes no sense to me, at least. So we're saying that we finish our Nyungne practice Saturday by 5. By 5:30, we set up table, do the chalk, okay? And then we might finish by 7. Then you go home. Then next morning you get up early, right? Otherwise, if you do 7:30 talk, you will be hanging out here, for 2 hours for nothing. You get home really late, and then you have to come back. That seems inconvenient. Does that make sense to me? Okay. I think it makes sense. So anyway, so we're changing that Saturday. Those who will be here for Nyungne, you know that. Those who are only coming for the talk, so they should be here by 5:30 for the Lama Tsongkhapa day. And then Sunday is the second day of the Nyungne. Start same time, 5:30, goes till 5. And then Monday, December 7, 5:30, one session until 8:30. Maybe you have a breakfast here, then go to work, things like that. Okay, so that's the next weekend schedule. But before all that start, as we said, Friday, December 4th, 7:30 here, for people who have not done Nyungne at all, and you don't know what the hell is that, right? Sorry to say, but maybe my American identity is coming out. So we will explain what is involved in Nyungne practice for the new people. And also they said, some of you have requested for refuge vows, right? Want to take refuge with Geshe-la. So we'll do that in the beginning. So 7:30 we start, and Geshe-la will take a little bit of time to give the refuge vows, and then he will explain, about the Nyungne. Okay, and so you're welcome to that. So that's Friday, December 4th. Okay. Any other announcement I have? No. I think. Okay. Kange lo de Dimian Dinda Ninda Namda Rabsebe Jinyan Dungun Geshe Sije Nije Toga Lebam Zen Kanda Sebe Zunra Mari Mendon Dunge Geshe Rozo Gunla Buji Daze Yanla Shuju Yangden Sun Ruda Chedo Nyumo Leje Chadro Jose Jen Mari Minse Dunge Nyugo Jinye Junze Rade Dene Dajin Saju Daze Yunden Lunzo Yaze Tuyu Gu Juda Judan Juni Yende Dal Yangla Du Marabadana Omarambaza Nandi Zenden Juye Jera Vese Yen Dalu Demo Memba Rase Kada Denje Junglu Toba Yen Lode Bobe Now Sedo Zo Lode Yazu Vujun Bega De Gesan Pungwe Judo Memba Lemba Zenla Wangdo Jijo Tanyen Jugun Jola So Wan De page 21. Obeisance to my Guru and Protector Manjushri, who holds at his heart a scriptural text, symbolic of his seeing all things as they are, whose intelligence shines forth as the sun, unclouded by delusions or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with the loving compassion of Father for his only Son, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You whose dragon thunder-like proclamation of Dharma arouses us from the stupor of our delusions and free us from the iron chains of our karma, who wills the sword of wisdom, heaving down suffering wherever sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of ignorance. You who have been pure from the beginning, who have completed the stages achieving the highest perfection of a bodhisattva, whose princely body is adorned with 112 marks of a Buddha, I bow down to you, Manjushri, Om Arabaza Na Di. O compassionate one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so that I may gain insight into Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. Page 31. Like the sweet perfume of white lotus, born in the ocean of knowledge, nourishing honeybees, the fortunate being, your fame pervades all directions. You are proficient and powerful in upholding the precious doctrine. To you, O Lobsang Tenzing Wangda, respectfully I pray.
Nhất tâm kính lễ Đức Văn Thù Sư Lợi, bậc đại trí ngài điều phục hai chướng ngại, tựa nhật quang lan tỏa khắp mười phương, bậc thực chứng chân nghĩa màu rốt ráo, từ tim ngài bát nhã kinh thủ hộ nhiệm màu, cõi luân hồi chúng sanh thọ nghiệp báo, bị ngăn che bởi phiền não vô minh, sở hữu 60 pháp âm thủ thắng, cùng đại bi ngài hóa độ chúng sanh, tựa từ mẫu chăm lo cho quý tử. Tiếng rồng vang ngài thức tỉnh hữu tình, thoát khỏi vòng luân hồi nghiệp chướng, gươm trí tuệ ngài chặt đứt vô minh, tận diệt muôn vàn khổ đau cùng ách nạn. Trường tử Như Lai tối thắng toàn giác, ngài an trụ nơi thập địa pháp vân, báu thân ngài trang nghiêm thanh tịnh, 112 tứ hảo Như Lai, đê đầu đảnh lễ Đức Văn Thù Sư Lợi, cúi xin ngài tận diệt ám chướng vô minh. Om Arapasanadi, con khẩn cầu dưới gót sen bậc đại trí. Được trí sáng con thâm nhập nghĩa màu, pháp vi diệu cùng muôn vàn luận giải. Như diệu hương ngọt ngào từ sen trắng, đàn xanh nơi trí thủ thắng đại dương, hàng thiện căn như ong mật thọ nương, hồng danh ngài khắp mười phương quảng bá. Đấng thiện xảo uy dũng bảo tồn pháp bảo vô giá. Nam mô Lobsang Tenzin Wangdak, xin cung kính trì niệm.
Okay, two minutes, James, you should do. Pomo, made a long issue, have strong one. Chris Morales, two minutes, James, not all. Our prayer request for Chris Morales, age 20, passed away, and then others, I'm sure, have passed away, so we think about them and do some prayers. cha dong gu lu ge bu ye bo dong zhen dong ge ba sang bu sang ye dong gang la gang de la de dong ba zhen ba chen le shi la chang zhe le o ma ne be me 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 o ma ne Omane beme hore gewa di nyodo da chere sewan rojo ne rowa cheya geba yo gewa de ye nyoro do lo Sajibeji Joshe Mendo Dra Rira Ninshe Ninde Yenpa De Sanje Shindo Mide Viwa Lowe Nanda Jinla Cheba Jo Kari Rabe Gobe Shingan De Pendan Dewa Malu Jongwe Shere Sewa Tenzin Yazo Ye Shabe Side Ba Tenjo Je Yedan Guru Rana Mandela Niya Daya